The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the blue world of Varantis. Inside, 7 species sat around a circular table that glowed with soft light. They had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and they knew it well. Their ships were fast, their weapons could destroy planets, their technology was beyond anything most worlds could imagine. Doyon Kim stood before them in his simple black suit. He represented Earth, a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy that wanted to join the council. Behind him, 3 other humans waited quietly. They had traveled for 6 months to reach this place, crossing distances that made their minds hurt to think about. The Velkari representative, a tall reptilian creature named Thiessen, looked at Doyon with golden eyes that showed no warmth. His scales were deep green, and they clicked softly when he moved. He tapped a claw on the table and spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "We have reviewed your petition," Thiessen said. "Earth wishes to join the Galactic Council. This is acceptable, but you must understand your place." Doyon nodded slowly. He had expected this. The other delegates had warned him that the council did not treat new members kindly. Still, he kept his face calm and his voice steady. "We understand the council has standards," Doyon replied. "We are willing to learn and contribute what we can." A being made of shifting light patterns floated above another seat. The lumens were pure energy, and this one called itself brightness. It pulsed with colors that might have been laughter. "Contribute," brightness hummed. "Your technology is 3 centuries behind ours. Your fastest ships take months to cross distances. Our vessels cover in days. What could you possibly contribute?" Another council member, a 4-armed creature covered in blue fur, leaned forward. Her name was Kellis, and she was known for being direct. "Your weapons are particularly amusing," she said. "You still use metal projectiles propelled by chemical reactions. We abandoned such things 2,000 years ago." Doyon felt heat rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would help nothing. He had studied these species for years, learning their languages and their ways. He knew they saw humans as primitive, barely worth noticing. But Earth needed this membership. They needed access to the trade routes, the technology, the protection that came with being part of the council. "Our weapons serve their purpose," Doyon said carefully, "and we are eager to learn from more advanced civilizations." Thiessen made a sound that might have been a snort. "Very diplomatic. Very human from what we have observed. You are good at words." He touched a panel, and images appeared in the air above the table. They showed Earth's military forces. Soldiers in armor, tanks rolling across fields, ships floating in orbit around the planet. "Your soldiers wear physical armor," Thiessen continued. "They carry supplies on their backs. They require sleep, food, and medical care. Most advanced species use automated defense systems or energy-based protection. You are, as we said, primitive." The other council members made various sounds of agreement. One of them, a floating jellyfish-like being, pulsed with what looked like amusement. Doyon took a slow breath. In the gallery above, he could see other humans watching. One of them was Captain Jiwon Park, a military officer who had insisted on coming despite having no official role in the negotiations. She wore her uniform, and her face was hard as stone. Doyon wondered what she was thinking. "Primitive or not," Doyon said, "we are here. We are asking for membership. Earth has much to offer in terms of culture, resources, and perspective." "Perspective," Kellis repeated, her whiskers twitching. "Yes, perhaps that has value." "Very well. Earth is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council." Doyon felt relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. "However," Thiessen added, "you will be placed in the lowest tier. You will have minimal voting rights. You will pay tribute of 50% of your refined metals and rare elements annually. You will provide labor for council projects as needed. You will have no voice in military decisions. These terms are not negotiable." 50%. Doyon's mind raced. That would cripple Earth's economy. They had hoped for fair treatment, for partnership. Instead, they were being made into servants. "That seems excessive," Doyon said, trying to keep his voice level. It is standard for new members of your technological level, Brightness hummed. You should be grateful we are allowing you in at all. Many worlds never receive such an opportunity. Doyan looked at each council member in turn. He saw no sympathy, no willingness to negotiate. They had made their decision before he even arrived. This meeting was just a formality, a chance for them to remind humanity of its place in the galactic order. We accept, Doyan said finally. What choice did Earth have? They were alone out here, vulnerable. Without council protection, any hostile species could attack them, and they would have no allies to call on. Excellent, Thiessen said. You will receive the full documentation within one standard cycle. Welcome to the Galactic Council, humanity. Try not to embarrass yourselves too badly. The other council members made various sounds of amusement. The meeting was over. Doyun bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that felt like swallowing glass, and turned to leave. His fellow delegates followed, their faces carefully blank. In the gallery, Juwan watched them go. She had heard every word, seen every dismissive gesture. Her hands gripped the railing in front of her hard enough that her knuckles turned white. She had spent 20 years in Earth's military. She had fought in 3 wars, led soldiers through hell, earned every medal on her chest through blood and sacrifice. And these creatures thought humans were primitive. They thought Earth's military was a joke. Giwan made a note in her personal device, marking details about the council chamber, the security systems, the way the different species moved and spoke. She was a soldier, and soldiers gathered intelligence. She did not know why she was doing it, but something deep in her gut told her this information would matter someday. As she left the gallery, she passed a group of Velkari officers. They were speaking in their own language, but her translator caught the words. Humans, one of them said with a laugh. They still think physical courage matters. How quaint. Guan kept walking, her face showing nothing. But inside, something cold and hard settled into place. These species had no idea what humans were capable of. They looked at Earth's technology and saw weakness. They had never seen what humans did when they were pushed to the edge. Someday, Guan thought, they would learn. She just hoped she would be there to see it. 6 months passed quickly for the Galactic Council. But for Earth, every day was a struggle. The tribute payments were crushing the economy. Mines ran at full capacity, refineries worked around the clock, and still it was barely enough to meet the Council's demands. Doyan spent his time negotiating for better terms, but the Council ignored most of his requests. Humanity had signed the agreement, and now they would live with it. Then everything changed. The first attack came without warning. A council listening post on the rim of known space went silent. Then another. Then 3 more. By the time the council realized something was wrong, an entire sector had gone dark. The Kresh Empire had returned. Nobody had seen them in 200 years. They were a warrior species that rejected the council long ago, disappearing into the void beyond the galactic rim. The council had assumed they were gone, destroyed by their own violence or lost in deep space. They were wrong. The Kresh came back with a fleet that blotted out stars. Their ships were massive things, black and angular, covered in weapons that glowed red like heated metal. They did not send messages or make demands. They simply attacked. The Council's first defense fleet moved to intercept. 50 ships, each one a miracle of technology, armed with energy weapons that could cut through asteroids. The fleet's commander was confident. The Kresh might have numbers. The Council had superior technology. The battle lasted 17 minutes. The Kresh, weapons adapted to every defense the Council used. Energy shields that should have been impenetrable failed. Automated targeting systems were hacked and turned against their own ships. The few Council vessels that survived limped back to base with tales of an enemy that fought with precision and overwhelming force. Within 3 weeks, 4 Council worlds fell. Billions of beings became refugees, fleeing in massive ships toward the core systems. The Council chamber, once so calm and confident, turned into a place of chaos and fear. Species that had not raised their voices in centuries now screamed at each other, demanding action, demanding protection. Thiessen stood before tactical displays that showed the Kresh advance. Red markers spread across the map like a disease. He had studied warfare for 2 centuries, commanded fleets that never lost a battle. Now he watched his entire strategic doctrine collapse. "They are too fast," he said to the council. "We need time to regroup, to develop countermeasures to their technology." "Time," Kellis snarled. "They will reach the core worlds in 2 months at this rate." "Where will we get time?" Illumin flickered anxiously. "Our automated defenses are useless against them. They hack our systems faster than we can deploy them. We need organic soldiers, beings who cannot be hacked or controlled." The council fell silent. Most species had given up ground warfare scent. Years ago, why risk living soldiers when machines could do the fighting? Now that doctrine was destroying them. "We need ground forces," Thiessen said slowly. "We need to hold worlds while we pull back our fleets and reorganize." "Where will we find such forces?" Brightness asked. "Most of our species have not trained ground soldiers in generations." Thiessen's eyes gleamed with an idea that felt wrong, even as he thought it. "We have one species that specializes in ground combat. A primitive species, but numerous. Expendable."
You mean the humans?
Kellis said. "Yes. Earth has a large military. Millions of trained soldiers. They use primitive tactics, but the Kresh will not expect that. We send them to hold critical worlds. Even if they fail, they will buy us the time we need." The other council members exchanged looks. It was a cold calculation, using one species as a shield for the others. But they were desperate, and desperation made such choices easier. "Very well," Brightness hummed. "Contact Earth. Tell them the council requires their military support." The message reached Admiral Sungmin Lee 3 days later. He was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He read the orders carefully, then read them again. The council wanted Earth to send forces to defend Tenebris for an agricultural world in the path of the Kresh advance. They made it sound like an honor, a chance for humanity to prove their worth. Sungmin saw it for what it was: a suicide mission. The council expected humans to die while the superior species saved themselves. He called a meeting of his senior officers. They gathered in a plain room with maps and displays covering the walls. Among them was Jiwon Park, now a captain commanding a mechanized company. She had been preparing for something like this since the day she watched the council dismiss humanity. "They expect us to fail," Sungmin said bluntly. "They see us as a delaying tactic, nothing more." "Then we decline," one officer suggested. "No," Giwon said. "We accept." Everyone looked at her. "Think about it," she continued. "This is our chance. They think we are weak, primitive. Let them think that. We go in, we fight the way we know how, and we show them what humans can do." Sungmin studied her for a long moment. "You understand that many of our soldiers will die." "I understand," Juan said quietly. "But they will die anyway if the Kresh reach Earth. At least this way, we fight on our terms. And we make the council see us differently." Another officer, a man named Hyun Woo Nam, nodded slowly. "She is right. We have been paying tribute for 6 months, bowing and scraping to species that mock us. Time to remind the galaxy what humans are." Sungmin made his decision. "Very well. We mobilized the 3rd Marine Division, the 7th Mountain Infantry, and the 15th Special Operations Regiment. Total force, 30,000 soldiers. We take our own transport and supply ships. We do this the human way." Orders went out across Earth's military bases. Soldiers packed their gear, checked their weapons, and said goodbye to families. Among them was Lieutenant Haijin Choi, a young officer with sharp eyes and a reputation for keeping her soldiers alive. She briefed her platoon in a hangar bay while transport ships prepared for launch. "Listen up," she said, her voice carrying over the noise of engines. "We are going to a place called Tenebris 4. It is a farm world, lots of open ground and some cities. The enemy is called the Kresh. They are bigger than us, stronger than us, and better equipped." She paused, looking at each face. "But they have never fought humans before. They have never seen what we do when someone threatens our home. Stay with your squad, follow your training, and watch each other's backs. We are going to show the galaxy what Earth's military can do. The soldiers shouted agreement, their voices echoing off metal walls. They were scared, most of them, but they were ready. They had trained for this their entire careers. Elsewhere on the transports, Sergeant Minho Kong was checking equipment with his squad. He was a quiet man who had grown up in the mountains and joined the military to see the stars. Now, he was going to see war instead. He made sure every soldier had ammunition, rations, medical supplies. The basics never changed, no matter how far from home you went. The fleet launched on schedule. 30 human ships, small and tough, carrying soldiers and equipment toward Tenebris 4. On the bridge of the command ship, Sungmin watched Earth shrink behind them. He had led many missions, but never one like this. He was leading his people into battle against an enemy that had destroyed council fleets, but he believed in his soldiers. He had seen what they could do. The council saw primitive weapons and outdated tactics. Sungmin saw something else. He saw warriors who had been fighting each other for thousands of years, who had learned every dirty trick and hard lesson that came from war. The council had forgotten how to fight. Humans never had. Tenebris 4 looked peaceful from orbit. Green and gold fields stretched across the continents, broken by rivers and scattered cities. It fed 17 other worlds with its grain and vegetables. The local population, a species of short gray beings called the Tenari, had already evacuated. Only automated harvesting machines remained, still working in the fields as if nothing was wrong. The human forces landed in waves. Transport ships set down near the largest city, and thousands of soldiers poured out. They moved with practiced efficiency, setting up defensive positions, digging trenches, placing weapons. The council observers watching from orbit were confused. Why were the humans digging holes in the ground? Why were they spreading out instead of concentrating their forces? Primitive, one observer muttered. They are fighting like it is still their ancient past. The Kresh arrived 2 days later. Their ships appeared at the edge of the system, dozens of them, and launched drop pods toward the surface. The pods screamed through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire, and crashed into the ground with enough force to shake buildings. Doors blew open, and Kresh warriors emerged. They were terrifying to look at. Each one stood over 2 meters tall, covered in dark armor that seemed to be part of their bodies. They had 4 arms, each one holding a weapon that crackled with energy. Their faces were insectoid, with multiple eyes that glowed red. They had been bred for war, modified over generations to be perfect soldiers. 20,000 of them landed on Tenebris 4, and they began their march toward the human positions. In a field of tall grain, Minho and his squad waited in silence. They had camouflaged their positions with local plants and dirt. Their uniforms blended with the environment. Even their weapons were painted to match the surroundings. When the Kresh passed nearby, he saw nothing but empty fields. Minho watched through his scope as hundreds of Kresh warriors walked by. He counted them, noted their weapons and spacing, and reported it quietly over the radio. Other squads were doing the same across the entire area. The humans were not trying to stop the Kresh advance. They were gathering information. The Kresh reached the outskirts of the main city and found it empty. Confused, they spread out to search the buildings. That was when Juan gave the order. All units, fire. The city exploded with violence. Humans emerged from buildings, from sewers, from hidden positions in rubble. They hit the Kresh from every direction at once. Bullets tore through the air, and the Kresh discovered that their armor, designed to stop energy weapons, was far less effective against simple metal moving at high speed. Jiwan's tanks rolled out from covered positions, their cannons firing shells that were just explosives and metal. Each shot hit with tremendous force, and Kresh warriors were thrown back like toys. Chemical explosions ripped through their formations. The Kresh were shocked. They had never seen weapons like this. Their own technology was all energy-based, clean, and precise. The human weapons were loud, dirty, and brutal. And they worked. But the Kresh were not weak. They adapted quickly, using their numbers to overwhelm human positions. Energy weapons cut through buildings and vehicles. Their superior strength let them push through barricades. Within hours, they had taken half the city. Hajin's platoon was trapped in a collapsed building, cut off from the main force. She had 40 soldiers and dwindling ammunition. The Kresh surrounded them, calling for surrender in a dozen languages. "Lieutenant, what do we do?" a young soldier asked. His name was Taiyan Song, and his hands were shaking. Taiyan checked her weapon, then looked at her soldiers. They were exhausted, scared, and hurt. But they were still here, still fighting. She made a decision that would become famous across the galaxy. "Fix bayonets," she said calmly. Her soldiers stared at her. Bayonets were ancient weapons, just knives attached to rifles. Nobody used them anymore. Nobody except humans. "Fix bayonets," Haijin repeated. "We are going through them." Metal clicked as blades locked into place. Haijin stood up, and her soldiers stood with her. They had no energy shields, no advanced technology. They just had their weapons, their training, and each other. "Follow me," Haijin said, and charged. They burst from the building in a wave of violence. The Kresh, expecting surrender, were caught completely off guard. Humans crashed into them with rifles, firing and bayonet stabbing. It was close and brutal and nothing like the clean warfare the Kresh knew. Taiyan found himself face to face with a Kresh warrior twice his size. The creature swung an arm at him, but Taiyan ducked under it and drove his bayonet into a joint in the armor. The Kresh screamed, and Taiyan pulled the trigger at point-blank range. The fight lasted minutes but felt like hours. When it ended, Haijin's platoon had broken through the encirclement. They had lost 15 soldiers, but they were alive and moving. Behind them, the Kresh regrouped, now wary of these strange beings who fought like demons. Across the planet, similar battles raged. In the grain fields, Minho's squad emerged from hiding to ambush Kresh supply lines. They would strike fast, destroy what they could, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The Kresh sent patrols to find them, but the humans knew the terrain better. They used every trick they had learned in centuries of fighting each other. A specialist named Yuna Han held a firebase alone for 4 hours after her unit was forced to retreat. She radioed for artillery support, calling down explosions on her own position as the Kresh swarmed toward her. When the bombardment stopped, she walked out of the crater, covered in dirt and blood, but alive. The council observers could not believe what they were seeing. The battle for Tenebris 4 went on for 2 weeks. The Kresh pushed hard, using their numbers and technology to grind down the human positions. But humans did not break the way the council species did. When a position became untenable, they retreated in good order, set traps, and hit the Kresh from a new direction. Minho pulled a wounded soldier 3 kilometers through enemy territory, fighting off 2 Kresh patrols along the way. When asked why he risked his life, he just shrugged. "He is my brother," Minho said simply. As if that explained everything. G1 commanded her company through 12 separate engagements, losing half her vehicles but never losing her nerve. She learned to anticipate Kresh tactics and used their assumptions against them. When they expected humans to defend, she attacked. When they expected retreat, she held ground. The Kresh commander grew frustrated. He had never lost this many warriors to such a primitive enemy. His advantage in numbers was bleeding away in these constant small battles. The humans never gave him a clean fight, would never let him use his superior firepower effectively. Finally, he made a brutal decision. He leveled an entire city with orbital bombardment, destroying it completely to draw the humans out for a final battle. Sungmin watched from his command ship as the city burned. He had lost 3,000 soldiers in 2 weeks. The Kresh had lost over 12,000. The math was terrible, but it was in humanity's favor. "Pull back to defensive positions," he ordered. "Make them come to us." The final battle happened on an open plain. The Kresh committed everything they had left, determined to crush the humans once and for all. They came in a massive wave. Thousands of warriors supported by their remaining vehicles and air support. The humans met them with everything they had. Artillery hammered the Kresh lines. Tanks fired until their barrels glowed hot. Soldiers stood in trenches and shot until their weapons jammed from overheating. The noise was incredible. Constant roar of explosions and gunfire that could be heard from orbit. Hygiene stood with her platoon in a trench that was filling with empty shell casings. Only 7 of her original 40 soldiers remained. They were out of heavy weapons, almost out of ammunition for their rifles. But they were still here, still fighting. A Kresh warrior appeared at the edge of the trench, and Hyjin shot it with her sidearm. Another came, and she shot that one too. Then her pistol clicked. Empty She picked up a shovel instead. When relief forces finally broke through to her position 3 hours later, they found Hyjin sitting on a pile of Kresh bodies, the shovel bent and broken beside her. She looked up at them with eyes that had seen hell. "Took you long enough," she said. The Kresh withdrew from Tenebris 4 after 17 days of fighting. They left behind 60% of their invasion force, scattered across fields and cities in defeat. The remaining warriors retreated to their ships in confusion and anger. They had never experienced anything like this. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The observers had watched every moment of the battle, and what they saw did not match anything they understood about warfare. The numbers were clear on the displays. Humans, with their primitive weapons and outdated tactics, had defeated a force that had crushed council fleets with ease. Thiessen stood before the tactical screens, replaying footage over and over. He watched Hyjin charge with a bayonet, watched Minho carry his wounded comrade under fire, watched Yuna call artillery down on her own position. His mind, trained in logical warfare, could not process what he was seeing. "They should have broken," he said quietly. "After the first day, they should have retreated. After the first week, they should have surrendered." The casualties were unsustainable. Kella sat with her forearms folded, her blue fur dull with stress. But they did not break. They did not retreat. They fought like the concept of defeat does not exist to them. "Perhaps it does not," said a new voice. A small being entered the chamber, hunched and old. This was Velis, a xenopsychologist who had spent decades studying different species. The council rarely consulted her, considering her work more curiosity than necessity. But now they needed answers, Explain Brightness demanded. Velis activated a holographic display. Images of Earth appeared, showing its history, its nature, its violence. "I have been studying humans since they joined the council. What I found disturbs me greatly." She showed them predators from Earth, lions, tigers, bears, creatures that could kill with tooth and claw. Humans evolved on a death world. Everything there tried to kill them. They had no natural armor, no venom, no claws. They were soft and slow compared to other predators. "Then how did they survive?" Thiessen asked. "They refused to die," Velis said simply. "Where other species would have found safer environments or evolved defensive adaptations, humans developed something more dangerous. They developed persistence." She showed footage of ancient human hunts, where hunters would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, till the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Humans are endurance predators. They evolved to never stop, never give up. Their bodies produce chemicals during stress that let them ignore pain, ignore fear, ignore logic itself. More images appeared, showing human history. Wars, battles, last stands against impossible odds. This behavior is not limited to hunting. It pervades their entire species. When threatened, humans do not calculate odds or assess tactical situations rationally. They fight. When wounded, they fight. When outnumbered, they fight. When by all logic they should surrender, they fight harder. Thiessen watched footage of Hyjin defending her position with a shovel after running out of ammunition. "This is madness," perhaps Velis agreed. "Or perhaps it is something we lost long ago. Humans call it courage. They call it honor. They call it duty. But fundamentally, it is a refusal to accept defeat that is encoded in their very genetics." She brought up medical scans of human soldiers during combat. "Look at their biochemistry. When fighting, their bodies flood with adrenaline, endorphins, and dozens of other chemicals. They feel less pain. They think faster. They become temporarily more than they normally are. Some humans call it a combat high. Others call it survival mode. Kellis leaned forward, studying the data. How long can they maintain this state? That is the terrifying part, Velis said. As long as necessary. I found records of human soldiers fighting for days without sleep. Medics treating wounded while injured themselves. Leaders commanding troops with wounds that should have been fatal. Their willpower overrides their physical limitations. She showed them more history. Soldiers holding positions against 10-to-1 odds. Civilians resisting occupation for generations. Wars that lasted decades, sometimes centuries, because neither side would surrender. But surely they feel fear, Brightness hummed. Surely they understand when a situation is hopeless. Oh, they understand, Velis said. They feel fear just as strongly as any species, perhaps more strongly. But they have a saying on Earth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. They feel the fear and fight anyway. Thiessen turned away from the screens, his mind struggling with this information. Then we made a terrible mistake in dismissing them. Yes, Velis said. You looked at their technology and saw primitives. You missed what makes them truly dangerous. They are not afraid of death. Or more accurately, they are afraid, but they do it anyway. That makes them the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. She showed one final piece of footage. It was Minho, standing on a battlefield covered in crushed bodies, helping a wounded soldier drink water. His own armor was torn, his face covered in blood and dirt. But he was smiling, actually smiling, as he joked with his injured comrade. They do this for each other, Velis explained. Not for territory or resources or logical gain. They fight because their comrades are fighting. They endure because others are enduring. It is a collective insanity that makes them nearly impossible to defeat. The council sat in silence, absorbing this information. Everything they thought they knew about warfare had been proven wrong by one species in 2 weeks of combat. What do we do now? Kellis asked finally. We change everything, Thiessen said. The Crushers still coming. They have more forces, more worlds. We cannot defeat them using conventional tactics. But now we have something they have never faced. Humans, Brightness said. Yes, we need to make them full partners, not servants. Give them access to our technology, our resources. Train with them, learn from them. Because they know something we forgot. What is that? Velis asked. Thiessen looked at the frozen image of Minho smiling on the battlefield. How to win when losing is not an option? Orders went out immediately. The tribute payments were canceled. Human ships were given access to council refueling stations and repair facilities. Human soldiers were offered advanced armor and weapons, though many preferred to keep their own equipment. Doyen received the news in his quarters on the council station. He read the message 3 times, hardly believing it. Full membership. Equal votes. Technology sharing. Everything Earth had asked for, given freely. He called Sungmin immediately. Did you see this? Doyen asked. I did, Sungmin replied from his ship. They are scared of us now, is that good? Sungmin was quiet for a moment. It is better than being dismissed. Fear breeds respect eventually. We just need to show them we are not the monsters they are imagining. Are we not? Doyen asked quietly. I saw the footage, Sungmin. What our soldiers did out there. Is that not monstrous? No, Sungmin said firmly. It is human. We fight with everything we have because the alternative is losing everything we love. The council will learn the difference. Until then, we keep doing what we do best. What is that? Surviving. The news reached the soldiers on Tenebris 4, and they reacted with weary satisfaction. They had proven themselves, paid the price in blood and suffering. Now the galaxy knew what Earth could do. Hyjin sat with her remaining soldiers in a temporary camp. They were waiting for transport back to Earth, back to families and peace. Most of them just wanted to sleep for a week. We are heroes now, Taeon said, looking at his medal for valor. The council had sent commendations for hundreds of human soldiers. We are survivors, Hyjin corrected. Heroes are for stories. We just did our jobs. But in her heart, she felt pride. Not in the killing or the violence, but in what they had endured together. They had gone into hell and come out the other side. They had shown the galaxy that humanity deserved respect. Minho sat alone, cleaning his rifle for the 100th time. It was damaged, the barrel slightly bent from overheating, but it had saved his life more times than he could count. He would keep it forever. A reminder of Tenebras-4. Someone asked him if he was proud of what they accomplished. Myth thought about it for a long time before answering. Proud? No. Glad we survived? Yes. Glad we proved ourselves. Maybe, but mostly, I am glad it is over. But deep down, he knew it was not over. The Kresh were still out there, still a threat. And now that the Council knew what humans could do, they would call on Earth again next time, Minho thought. Maybe the galaxy would fight beside them as equals instead of watching from orbit. That would make the difference. 3 months after Tenebris 4, the Kresh Emperor made his final move. He was done with cautious advances and testing defenses. Every ship in his empire, every warrior he could muster, formed into one massive fleet. They would strike at the heart of Council space and end this war in a single, overwhelming assault. The target was the Void Curtain, a massive asteroid field that marked the boundary between Council space and the Outer Rim. Control the Void Curtain, and you controlled access to 20 core worlds. Lose it, and the Council would fall within months. The Council called an emergency meeting. This time, when Doyen entered the chamber, 7 species stood to greet him. Thiessen approached first, his scales gleaming in the light. Ambassador Kim Thiessen said formally, "We request Earth's assistance in defending the Void Curtain. This is not a command. This is a request from equals." Doyen felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction at finally being treated with respect, but also wariness. "What exactly are you asking for?" "Everything," Kella said bluntly. "The Kresh are coming with their entire fleet. We need every ship, every soldier. We need humanity to fight beside us as full partners. And if we say no," Doyen asked, brightness pulsed with honest light, "then we will lose, and eventually the Kresh will reach Earth anyway. But we will not blame you. You have already given much." Doyen thought about the soldiers on Tenebris 4, the ones who died and the ones who came home changed. He thought about Hai-Jin defending her position with a shovel, about Minho carrying his wounded brother through enemy fire. They had earned respect for humanity, but at what cost? "I need to consult with our military command," Doyen said. Of course, Thiessen replied, "But please hurry! The Kresh will reach the Void Curtain in 2 weeks." Doyen returned to his quarters and immediately contacted Earth. Sung Min appeared on the screen, looking tired but alert. "They want us to fight again," Doyen said. "I know. I have been monitoring the situation. The Kresh fleet is massive, Doyen. Even with the Council forces, this will be the hardest battle humanity has ever faced. Can we win?" Sung Min was quiet for a long moment. "If we fight as equals with the Council, if they trust us and we trust them, then maybe. But it will cost us. Many will not come home. Is it worth it?" "That is not for me to decide," Sung Min said. "That is a question for Earth's government, for the people. But I will tell you what I think. If we do not stand with the Council now, we will stand alone later. And alone we will fall." Earth's government debated for 2 days. The arguments were fierce. Some said humanity had already paid enough, that the Council had treated them like servants for months. Others said this was exactly the moment to prove that Earth belonged among the stars. In the end, they voted to commit their forces. Every ship that could fly, every soldier that could fight, Earth would stand with the Council. The combined fleet gathered at the Void Curtain. Council ships, sleek and advanced, positioned themselves in formation. Human ships, smaller and tougher, took positions among them. For the first time, different species trained together, learned each other's tactics, shared their strengths. Giwan commanded a human frigate called the Defiant. Her crew was a mix of humans and Velkari, an experiment in combined operations. At first, the Velkari were nervous. They had watched footage of Tenebris 4 and were not sure if they wanted to fight alongside beings that crazy. But as they trained together, something changed. The Velkari learned that humans were not mindless berserkers. They planned, they adapted, they cared deeply about minimizing casualties. And the humans learned that the Velkari, despite their technological advantages, respected courage and skill. "You are not what I expected," a Velkari officer named Kreth told Gyuan one evening.
And what did you expect?
Juan asked. "Primitives who won through luck and numbers." Juan smiled slightly. "And now I see warriors who understand that war is not about technology. It is about will. And humans have more will than any species I have met." On the flagship, Sungmin worked with Thiessen to coordinate the defense. They stood over tactical displays, planning fleet movements and fallback positions. "Your people will be on the front lines," Thiessen said. "The Kresh will focus on breaking through our center. Human ships are tough enough to hold that position." "And the council ships?" Sungmin asked. "We provide long-range support and mobility. Our energy weapons can damage Kresh ships from distances your projectile weapons cannot reach. Together, we cover each other's weaknesses." It was a plan that made sense, using each species for what they did best. But Sungmin knew that plans rarely survived contact with the enemy. The Kresh arrived exactly on schedule. Their fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a massive formation. Hundreds of ships darkening the space around them. They did not pause or negotiate. They simply attacked. The battle began at long range. Council ships fired their energy weapons, beams of light that crossed the void and struck Kresh vessels. Some were destroyed immediately, but most pushed through, their armor absorbing the damage. They returned fire with their own weapons. Red bolts of energy that splashed against Council shields. The Kresh fleet drove forward, like a spear aimed at the heart of the defensive line. Human ships moved to intercept their railguns and missile systems, firing constantly. The void between the fleets filled with metal and explosions. Then the Kresh revealed their tactic. They released thousands of smaller craft, fast attack ships meant to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. The Council ships tried to target them with automated defenses, but the Kresh had learned. They hacked the systems, turned them off, left the Council vessels vulnerable. That was when Jiwan made her decision. "All power to engines," she ordered. "We are going in, Captain," her second officer asked. "That is suicide." "Maybe," Jiwan said, "but it will work. Trust me." The Defiant accelerated toward the nearest Kresh capital ship, dodging fire from smaller craft. The Velkari crew watched in horror as they realized what Jiwan planned to do. "She is insane," Kreth muttered. "Yes," another human officer agreed with a grin. "Welcome to humanity." The Defiant crashed into the Kresh ship's hangar bay, tearing through the doors with its reinforced hull. Before the Kresh could react, Juwan's crew was already pouring out. Armed and ready for close combat, the fighting inside the Kresh ship was brutal and fast. Humans and Velkari fought side by side, clearing corridors and compartments. The Kresh had never experienced boarding actions, had never trained for fighting inside their own vessels. They panicked. 30 minutes later, Jiwan stood on the bridge of the captured Kresh ship, her uniform torn and bloody, but her voice steady. "This is Captain Park to all human vessels. Boarding actions are effective. Repeat, boarding actions are effective." Across the battlefield, human ships began ramming into Kresh vessels, turning the space battle into something far more personal. It was chaos, it was insane, and it was working. On the surface of a nearby asteroid, Hyunwoo Nam led a ground assault on a Kresh staging base. His force was a mix of human soldiers and Council species who had trained with them. They moved through the asteroid's tunnels. Fighting room by room, a group of Council soldiers became pinned down by heavy Kresh fire. They were about to retreat when Minho appeared, now a sergeant major leading a rescue team through a side tunnel. "Stay down," he told the Council soldiers. "We will handle this." His team burst into the room where the Kresh were positioned, and the fight was short and violent. When it ended, the Council soldiers stared at the humans in amazement. "You came back for us," one of them said. Of course, Minho replied. "That is what partners do." The battle raged for 3 days. Ships were destroyed on both sides. Thousands died in the void and on asteroids. But slowly, the combined fleet gained the upper hand. The Kresh had expected the Council to fight the way they always did, with technology and distance. Instead, they faced an enemy that adapted, that used every tactic available. They refused to break. On the third day, the Kresh Emperor finally understood that he could not win. His fleet was being torn apart. His warriors were dying by the thousands. He sent a message requesting a ceasefire. The Council accepted. Not because they wanted mercy, but because they had proven their point. The Kresh Empire sued for peace, offering to withdraw from all conquered territory and pay reparations. In the aftermath, the combined fleet limped back to safe space. Damaged ships leaked atmosphere, wounded filled medical bays, and everyone was exhausted. But they had won. Dujin stood in the council chamber once more. But this time, he stood among equals. The 7 species no longer looked down on him. They looked at him with respect earned through shared sacrifice. You asked once what humanity could contribute. Doyon said to Thiessen. Now you know. We contribute the understanding that some things are worth fighting for. That courage is not about technology or strength, but about choosing to stand when standing is hard. Thiessen bowed his head slightly. We have learned much from your species, and we hope to learn more as partners. The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full status, not because of obligation or fear, but because Earth had earned it through blood and courage. Back on the Defiant, Quan received a message from the Council's military command. They wanted to learn human boarding tactics, wanted to train with human forces, wanted to understand how humans fought so effectively. She smiled as she read it. The galaxy was finally learning what Earth had known all along, that the strongest weapon was not the one that could destroy planets, but the spirit that refused to surrender. Haijin returned to Earth with her remaining soldiers. They were different now, harder and quieter, but they were alive, and they had changed the galaxy. She stood at the military cemetery where fallen comrades were honored, and she made a quiet promise. We showed them, she said to the stones. We showed them what humans can do. Minho went home to the mountains where he grew up. He tried to return to normal life, but found that normal no longer fit. So he did what many soldiers did. He became a trainer, teaching the next generation what he had learned among the stars. War is not glorious, he told his students. It is terrible, and it costs everything. But sometimes it is necessary. And when it is, you fight not because you are fearless, but because fear will not stop you. That is what makes us human. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was no longer dismissed as primitive or weak. They were recognized as warriors whose strength came not from technology, but from an unbreakable will. And in the darkness between stars, other species watched and wondered. If humans could change the galaxy like this, what else might they do? The answer, they would learn, was anything they set their minds to, because that was the true power of humanity. Not fearlessness in war, but the refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy would never be the same.